Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Talkability with Roxy Rocker. And I am so blessed today to introduce my guest, Dr. Victor Pineda, who I've been following for a while, but I only met last week, like literally a week ago. And I'm graced and I am blessed to welcome him to the show. Dr. Pineda, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you so much, Rox. My particular experience is very much based on my lived experience as a person with a disability. For those of you that can't see me, I'm a middle-aged Hispanic man wearing a white shirt and a brownish scarf. I sit in a permobile, electric wheelchair, and I have a machine that helps me breathe with a mask over my nose. I have brownish hair and a big smile because I get to be with you, Roxy, today. So thank you.
We met and there was an instant connection. And when you meet those types of people in the world, you just have to be grateful and just humble, because sometimes you meet people in the world that go beyond even the disability story. It's more of a human connection. And I think that's what happened with us when we met last week.
Well, look,
Before,
we're sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say that,
Mm,
when we show up fully, we are seen and heard and remembered. And, regardless of the circumstance that we could find ourselves, I was in a wheelchair, you were walking around with your cane and moving around with your camera and stuff. But at the same time, I think what we have to remember is everybody has a spark and a mission. And I was excited to talk about the work we're doing with your show and your audience. Because talkability is really about what is emerging for our community and what actions do we need to take. Too often, many of us feel alone and separated. And I think having a community makes us feel stronger and connected. My background is what you were kind of asking me to illustrate, introduce myself. I am a two-time presidential appointee. I served the U.S. Federal Access Board, overseeing 13 federal statutes around access and inclusion. I was one of the most active and youngest members to negotiate the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, a treaty that affects the lives of over 1.3 billion people in our community that did not have rights and did not have even the understanding that human rights were disability rights. So working alongside with advocates all over the world for the last 28 years brought me to the show with you today.
mhm. You know, I sat at my desk over 20 years ago, and I was part of the federal program of disability program navigators. And I remember your name when I was doing that work. And, you know, it was a big deal to be even fostering that paperwork that had to go to the federal government, because we were making systematic change around employment all over the nation. We were one of the pilot programs in Arizona. And then I got to go to back to Washington, D.C. and Arlington, and we were doing work around the National Service Inclusion Project and making employment as a pathway towards with volunteerism through AmeriCorps programs. And I didn't get to win any honors except a 40 under 40, but I was one of the original people with disabilities that won that. But I know that I was doing work that was making a difference. And recently I joined the statewide Independent Living Council. And one of the colleagues of mine said, I'm a systematic change agent. And my mouth almost fell. And I went, oh, my work had meaning. And I remember going, wow, because here it is years later, and at independent living centers, now they have systematic change agents. And we weren't called that, but indirectly, that was the work we were doing. We were making change all over the United States around one-stop centers, making sure that people with disabilities could get into those doorways. And you were doing large work in the government, and I was doing boots on the ground work, but it's all the same work, isn't it? Because we're all making change and we're all making differences in the world.
No, I think that's right, Roxy. What we really have to ask ourselves is, where do we come from as a community? And where are we going? And this year, in April of 27, we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the 504 Synod. The first time, where as Kitty Code says, the shut-ins and the shut-outs, waged a war against the highest level of government. Waged a struggle and won. And we won.
I know.
And we realize how much power we have. And what's most exciting is Apple TV turning that particular story into a big Hollywood movie. And just next month, in September 10th, there'll be the world premiere of the film Being Human, which is all of our origin story, the origin story of the first Center for Independent Living, the origin story of activism that brought people together to understand that we had much more in common when it comes to building coalitions. The Black Panthers, the Grey Panthers, the unions, the auto workers, Black churches, gay community members, all came together for 28 days and supported this clear and coordinated call to action, where our ancestors, said to those in power, we will not be treated like second-class citizens. We will no longer be ignored. We will be dealt with, and we're not going away. So sign the freaking regulations unchanged. And here we are, 50 years later, with these, victories that really make the American story possible.
Yes.
For the disabled community on the verge of being taken away.
5 years later, I got to go to kindergarten, and they diagnosed me when I was 5.5, 6 years old. If 504 wasn't in place, I would have never been diagnosed in school.
So that is how we have to, collectively say, this is not part of some distant past.
No.
This is a living promise and for the American dream for opportunity. And the challenges that we celebrate the 36th year of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is now the very end of Disability Pride Month in July when we're recording this. And yet, very core rulings like the DOJ, Department of Justice said they will no longer enforce Olmstead. That they're backing away from the community integration mandate of the ADA, that it's okay for states to put people in asylums, in nursing homes, if we are seen to be too costly or too much of a burden And so really what we're coming up against is potentially a new wave of eugenics, where
Yeah.
disability is not seen as a natural part of the human condition, but
Hmm.
some medical abnormality, which we aren't a medical abnormality. We are just like all human beings, you know, perfectly
Yes.
imperfect. We're perfectly imperfect.
100%. 100%. Tomorrow, despite the challenges, I'm still celebrating. I have a whole party planned with a fashion show, great food, but I'm going to be educating people on these challenges that we go through. But I'm still going to be celebrating these milestones because the more education that can get out there and the more unity that I can find in community, I'm going to still continue to do that.
Well, let me ask you something,
Yeah,
Roxy.
please.
What do you think is most important to your audience, right? Because not only do I bring a background on that policy advocacy, but I've also spent 15 years as a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and I really believe that education and your understanding are core tenets to a democracy. And I think your show can really allow people to learn about the issues. What do you think
That
are the most important issues?
that's what I want is the issues to really be very important. I want the issues to be known, and I think sometimes many of my audience are not disabled, and so I think the importance of having people who maybe are not disabled knowing and being educated on these issues is really invaluable because we can help. Barbara didn't know a lot of the issues until I educated her more. Now she's really becoming an advocate and somebody who is very engaged and is interested in what she was talking to family members. So I think knowing the issues, knowing, what's going on with Olmsted, what's happening in society, I think are really important pieces. Um, I want people to be educated on access. I want people to be educated on, what's going on in education. I think, funding for independent living centers. I'm in a community group and nobody even knows what the independent living center is. They don't even know. When I say independent living centers, people still question me and say, oh, they think that it's the old person's home. They think it's a nursing home or places where people who are elderly live and are independent in the community. So I think it's the general blanket of education. And giving that education is the whole reason why I started the company Embracing Disability and then moving into levels of media and talking about media on how can we use media to have video on demand so people can understand about disability issues. Did that answer it?
Yeah, of course it is. I think the question for all of us is, it's hard to know what we don't know, but we can start asking questions.
Did I answer that question?
Of course you did.
Hmm.
And I think the question that we all have to ask ourselves is what do we do now? How do we take action? Look, I think there are many things that are high impact for your audience. We definitely have to think about, you know, how is it that our society is spinning out of control? How is it that we are facing so much political division? How do we look at policy changes to unlock our human potential? And I'm going to raise three topics on our discussion today. First is, what the heck are we doing about AI and the next
Mm.
generation
Yes.
of assistive technologies? Number two, I want to raise the topic of disability entrepreneurship in overcoming what's called the asset limit trap. And number three, we have to get into the topic of neurodiversity and unmasking in the workplace. How does that sound as areas of conversation, Roxy?
I'm I wish I had more people to have these conversations with in my life, because these are the conversations that open my heart and make me want to um fight, care, and bring on change.
Well, let's dive into the first. Let's dive
Okay.
into the first topic, okay? AI is not one thing. It's many, many ways that we can use text and speech and and voice and images that allow us to navigate the world and process information. Now, beyond general AI hype, we should really be highlighting how generative voice technologies, smart home automations, AI driven eye tracking are granting unprecedented independence to people that are nonverbal or have significant physical limitations. I think the question isn't about, what is going to be the impact of AI, on society. That's an important question because we have to understand water usage, environmental impacts, ethical use, privacy. But the real question is, how can we together build the systems that will unlock human potential in an ethical way, right? People love seeing cutting edge technology in action. And the disability community has always been at the forefront of that work because, as I like to say, is the assistive technology of today is the mainstream technology of tomorrow.
Mm.
So when I can dictate a paper by voice, or I can have a website be brought down to a simple language and plain language, the cognitive load is lowered and the accessibility is increased.
Mm.
If I can have Google Maps give me directions where there are curb cuts and I can avoid stairs, it makes my ability to feel safe moving around the city and participating in our city's activities much more at reach. So how do we bridge the gap between all these mainstream tech enthusiasts and AI optimists in the real world, use cases and accessibility in day-to-day life so that we can be grounded in how we are shaping our collective future?
I am just so amazed that we can even have these conversations. Yesterday, people were talking to me about AI and the how I could use AI. And one of the things that concerns me about AI is that I struggle with my learning disabilities and my brain injury. I like talk to text. I like that I can utilize certain things and the user experience is very supportive. But I do not want to start using something that's going to think for me or make changes for me in the way that I approach my thoughts and my creativity. I like the innovation that comes out of me. I don't want something like this. And I think that this is a great dialogue to begin these conversations. You're just so thought provoking, and you ask so many questions that are beyond just the basic issues. And I value that completely. This has just been such an amazing conversation already. And we're getting close to our time to that we're going to have you back again um, at some point. Um, and we're going to need to
Maybe we
take a
should take
short break.
a break.
I'm just, so much of this insight and incredible conversation that, I wish more people could be having. And you bring up so many topics and so much depth. And it's the depth of the human experience beyond the disability experience. So we can really move forward in this lifetime. We still need to fight because there's a fight that needs to happen. But also, we're trying to enrich people's lives. And I value that. And I thank you so much for these enriching topics that you've been bringing. It really is meaningful. Thank you.
So I know that we're running out of time, but I did want to raise the two other points I talked about earlier.
Yes.
Disability entrepreneurship is not possible unless we overcome the asset limit trap for our community. For disabled founders building businesses while navigating outdated systemic barriers and really disincentives to work, the Social Security insurance asset limits and Medicaid income caps penalize people with disabilities from working, threatening to remove vital home care, medical care, and other benefits when you get a job and you have $2,000 in your bank account. And I had to face that with my own, life. I had to get an education, but that when I went off to try to get a job, that education seemed worthless because I would have to trade my physical safety for a job, and a job that could not even afford me the most basic health care and home care that I needed. So we have to find a way to really put pressure on our elected representatives to remove this asset limit trap.
Yeah.
And also the asset limit trap is linked to marriage. So if I get married, my partner's income, my wife's income, also counts against my ability to keep my health insurance, Medicaid, home support, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And the final topic that I want to address is neurodiversity and unmasking in the workplace. many of us are not comfortable with the way that society views our disabilities, but some of us are. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we move past basic accommodations and address everybody's, pressure to mask, to hide who they truly are? And I think there's a huge cost to that burnout, especially if I have visible disabilities, but I also have invisible disabilities. How does an accessibility policy allow me to access content audibly instead of visually? Because I sometimes have an easier time processing, words and sounds and conversations that I have in reading dense books. And so all of these are really important because neurodiversity is one of the fastest growing conversations on TikTok, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The platforms, but HR leaders are really far behind. So all of this is really about having a more just society. And what I love about your work with embracing wellness is your holistic wellness background. How do we ensure there's a process to avoid caregiver fatigue?
Yes.
System regulation.
Yes.
Additional chronic pain management. Somatic healing. These are not topics that are in mainstream conversations, and they should be.
And they should be. Yes.
So, much more to talk about with you, Roxy Rocker.
Much more we'll talk about with you, Dr. Victor Pineda, my new BFF.
Well, let's give the team a big round of applause, and also your audience.
Yes.
They can connect with me on LinkedIn, Victor Pineda.
Please do.
I'm also at the Center for Independent Living, thecil.org, thesil.org, and obviously, stay connected because there's a big movie coming out. I have a new book coming out next year as well. So you get a lot to engage with.
So when that book comes out, we're going to bring you. Well, of course, we're going to bring you back as a special guest all the time. But when the book comes out, we'll have to figure out what kind of things we can do to help you get that book promoted.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was truly. I'm not going to even say it was an honor. It was just a blessing to be with you today. And, I think the deeper conversation that I want to have with you is how do we have more of these conversations around the country? Because please go to my website, embracingdisability.com. There's lots of information on there. But I think having these conversations around the globe and starting to have discussions like these would be extremely valuable to legislators, community members, community leaders, and community members, because, we have to continue this conversation, but we need a lot more people to have that conversation.
Well, I think we should put a link to the Independent podcast, Meeting the Moment for Disability Justice, and where we're having those conversations as well, so we can cross-connect our communities.
Wonderful.
And continue to sort of amplify what we can do together. Together we can do so much.
Together we can do so much. And I am delighted, excited to bring not just disability awareness, but somatic well-being awareness. And thank you again for watching. I could talk to this gentleman for hours, but thank you again for watching Talkability with Roxy and having my wonderful guest, Dr. Victor Pineda, today, and having these real conversations that we're going to continue to have. Thank you for being here for Pride Month and our ADA conversation. It was a joy to have you.
Thank you. Bye bye.